raised in Appleton. He's a graduate of Xavier High School. He received his bachelor from the University of Wisconsin in Oshkosh and works at sales at Nordon Business Environments. He had a very, very difficult interview to obtain his position at Nordon, but after a thorough vetting and interview with his father and grandfather, they gave him a job. His grandfather started the business in 1957, and Joe works alongside his father Jim and his brother Andy. Joe has a passion for history, particularly as it relates to Appleton and Wisconsin. Over the years, he's enjoyed writing articles about local history, teaching scout and homeschool groups, and leading tours at Riverside Cemetery in an effort to shine a light on Appleton's proud military tradition. Joe is a volunteer and board member at the History Museum in Appleton. He and his wife Jen homeschool their son. A fun fact, Joe is on a personal quest to read a biography on all the United States presidents. He just crossed William McKinley off the list. Are you doing them in chronological order?
No, and I know that's going to upset a lot of people. But
Who's next?
Wilson.
Woodrow Wilson, World War I.
Yeah.
And with that, a warm welcome, please, for Joe Gaerthofner.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Tom. Everything Tom said is true. I did say that. It's not fake news or anything like that. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Gwen. Thank you, Christine, for inviting me tonight. I'm excited to be here. And I also want to thank Jake Pulitzer, who's here tonight. Yeah, you're shaking your head, but I have to recognize, I have done tours for the History Museum here in Appleton, and last year we did one on World War I, and we're doing one again this August. And whenever I have struggled with topics or need more information, Jake just says, let me know what you need, and he is a wizard of the microfiche machine down at the library. So thanks again, Jake, for all your hard work in doing this. And Jake is also a vet, an Army vet too as well. All right. Tonight, I'd like to take a different approach. As mentioned, I have done a cemetery tour last year on World War I. So tonight, instead of me walking around, it's going to be hard. I have to stand in one spot all night here, and instead of it being an hour and a half, I know I got a limited amount of time, so I'm going to kind of condense some things here, do some generalization, but bear with me. Got a lot of good stuff, and I think a lot of good stuff for you to see here tonight. So with that, I'm going to start my presentation with an event that occurs in Appleton 9 months after World War I has ended, and 2 months removed since the boys from Appleton returned home from Europe. The Appleton 4th of July celebration in 1919. Now, this particular celebration, it was an annual celebration in Appleton of the 4th of July, but this particular one was a little bit different in the fact that Appleton was honoring those who had just served in the Great War. It was also a day to remember those from Appleton and Outagamie County who gave their lives in battle. The war was over, and everyone who lived in Appleton during those 19 months of the war was impacted by the war. Everyone in the city was impacted by the war. So tonight we're going to focus on two sections. One is the military aspect of Appleton in World War I, and the second is life at the home front. What was life like here in Appleton during World War I? Because there's several things that were going on here that I think are quite astonishing and to learn about here tonight. Now this particular image, some of you can probably guess where it is, and I'll try not to poke an eye out here, but that is the Episcopal Church. This is College Avenue looking east. This would be whereabouts where the History Museum is now, and there's Drew Street. So flanking the street, College Avenue, you're going to see almost like these obelisk-looking monuments. And then you're going to have these shorter guys, these pedestals, flanking, scattered throughout, going all the way to where Lawrence would be hiding back there. You would have the shield here, but specifically the pedestals are of interest and noted during the celebration. If you can see here, here's an example of one of the pedestals, and it says, Outagamie County's martyred dead. And this particular one shows those who had died in camp from Outagamie County. Okay, so those pedestals that you saw on College Avenue, they would be marked for those men who died during battle, where they died, as well as what specific unit they served in during the war. And here's another example. You can kind of see the shield there with some flags and some of the soldiers that were going to be honored in a small parade that day in 4th of July, 1919. All right, so I know all of you know about World War I, right? But let's just, in case those of you, let's catch up on exactly how it started and how we got to Appleton in World War I. All right. This is the front page of the Appleton Evening Crescent, and if you were to open this edition up, right there in the center is an article that says, Heir to Austria Throne Killed. And what this is saying, the article mentions this historic event that happened. The heir to the throne of the Austrian-Hungary Empire, Archduke Ferdinand and his wife, are assassinated while visiting Sarajevo. Sarajevo is a small, well, not small, but it's a city within the empire, the Austrian-Hungary Empire. Unfortunately, the Austrian-Hungary Empire suspects terrorists from neighboring Serbia behind the assassination attack. Because of that, Austria-Hungary gives an ultimatum to Serbia to allow them to do an internal investigation in Serbia, basically to try to prove Serbia was behind the attack. Serbia refuses to do that, right? If they wouldn't have refused, we wouldn't be here talking about World War I. Okay. End of July 1914, Austria-Hungary attacks Serbia. All right, so the problem with that and what's going to cause this mass confusion, this mass chaos, are alliances between countries. All right, so here's Austria-Hungary we were just talking about, and here's little Serbia. Serbia has a big brother, Russia. Russia says to Austria-Hungary, if you attack our little brother Serbia, we are going to go to war against you. So Austria-Hungary knows about this, and they go to their big brother, Germany, and says, will you help us out if these guys attack us? And Germany says yes. In a famous what's called the blank check, Germany says, we got you, we got your back. Now, unfortunately for Germany, France over here has an agreement with Russia, and it says that if either country it goes to war against Germany, the other will assist. Germany knows this. And if you're Germany, now what scares you about this alliance? Right? You got somebody on both sides of you. So because of that, Germany is going to be on the offensive. So when Austria-Hungary attacks Serbia at the end of July, Germany is going to go on the offensive and actually take the battle to France. It's Germany's objective to knock out France within about 6 weeks after going west, okay? They're going to use about 80-90% of their army to attack France. Hopefully they do it that quickly so then they can turn around and take on Russia. Two problems with that. Number one, when Germany goes and attacks France in early August, they are going to go through neutral Belgium. Because of that, Belgium has an arrangement with Great Britain. Great Britain says, we will protect you, Belgium, if anyone were to attack or invade you. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is Germany gets as far as a few miles east of Paris in the middle part of September. Unfortunately, their attack dies off. They are not successful. In what was called the Miracle of the Marne, they are held off by the French and ultimately pushed back to the eastern part of France. There, Germany will dig in the end of September, October, and for basically the next 2.5 years, Germany will be here in about a 300-mile line, which we call the Western Front, okay? So that's the backstory. Like I said, for the next 2.5 years until the United States gets involved, That is what Europe looks like. Okay? All right. Now, of course, with the war in Europe is headline news here in Appleton. In August 1914, Appleton has a population of around 18,000 people. We don't know the exact ethnic makeup of Appleton at that time, but we do know that based on one study from 1910, that about 38% of Wisconsin's population was either born in or had parents from Germany or Austria-Hungary. In contrast, 8% of Wisconsin's population has ties to the Allies in Europe. When war breaks out in Europe, the impact is immediately felt in Appleton. Michael Wagner and 18 Appleton Germans are notified that they may be called to report to the German consulate in Chicago to serve in the German army. As German citizens, men ages from 17 to 45 are in the German reserves. So at any time, they could be called up to serve for their country. Now, you might think, well, they live in the United States, right? Well, what are they going to do? Is Germany going to come over here and get me to go back over there and serve the fatherland? Well, take Dr. Metzler, a chemist at Tillmany Paper. He is notified that he may also need to report if he wants to keep his property in Germany. So there's his threat. He still owns property in Germany. If you want to keep that, you better come over and serve for the fatherland. And you also have Ernst Ruff. He's manager at Tallulah Paper. He's lived in the U.S. for 15 years, 2 years in Appleton, and has a brother who's a professor at Lawrence. He is reported as the first man from Appleton who is called to report for Germany. I wish I knew what happened to Ernst Ruff. There's a great project for somebody, but I don't know what happened to Ernst and some of these other men we're talking about. In Madison, in the same month in August, it's reported that 300 men are told to report to the German consulate in Chicago. There are a number of stories about local support for Germany. One support about Paul Robel, who works in the Kaukauna planning mill and who has lived in the U.S. since 1912, is quoted in the Crescent saying, quote, "Lick the Kaiser, it can't be done," unquote. All right. So like I mentioned, for the next 2.5 years, the United States, or let me jump back here. Thank you. All right. For the next 2.5 years, the United States is neutral until the U.S. declares war in April 1917. Several factors include that decision. One is the sinking of the Lusitania in 1915, the Zimmerman telegram that's discovered in 1917, which Germany sends to Mexico. It tells Mexico, if you invade the United States and we win, we'll give you southwestern United States back. And also the sinking of several U.S. transports are reasons why the U.S. will declare war on Germany on April 6th. Mayor Knipple of Appleton issues a proclamation the following day for creation of a citywide event to promote, quote, the spirit of loyalty and patriotism and unity. This is done with the Loyalty Day parade on April 9th, 1917. Businesses and schools are closed on Loyalty Day. An estimated 5,000 people participate in the parade, which is 25 blocks long. The day also includes several patriotic speakers by Postmaster Gustav Keller and President of Lawrence, I believe it's Lawrence College then, Lawrence College, Samuel Platts. Now this particular one, here we go with the church that we just saw before, another slide. This is Drew Street here, and back in the distance you would see Lawrence. And you could see a number of, it looks mainly like women and children are in this picture, but on the articles about this particular event, people were encouraged to bring their flags. And you can see in this particular picture, that was followed. Here's a good picture too from a participant in that. It says up here, if you can see that, Appleton High School. This was called the Living Flag. This was a participant in the Loyalty Day Parade. I often wonder what would happen if one of these people in the front row accidentally fell. So I don't know, but they should bring that flag back for Flag Day this year or something. When the U.S. declares war in 1917, the U.S. Army is made up of 250,000 men, half of which are professional soldiers, and the other half are reserve units with the National Guard. It is through the National Guard that Appleton will immediately get involved militarily. In 1882, Wisconsin creates 2 regiments of National Guard soldiers. Each regiment will have 8 companies of soldiers, which is about anywhere from 50 to 75 men per company. In most cases, each company is made up of volunteers at the local level. Here in Appleton, a group of soldiers will create what is known as Company G of the 2nd Wisconsin Regiment. Company G will also serve in the Spanish-American War in 1898. Since Company G is based out of Appleton, they will have 2 headquarters here, or what is known as an armory building. So in this particular photo, this is from 1897, a year before the Spanish-American War, and this is the Company G standing in front of the first known armory in Appleton, which was also located on College Avenue. Okay. The second armory was built in 1904, and I'm sure many of you have seen photos like this and are familiar with the story. But again, here's our landmark again. Drew Street would be right there, and this is looking west on College Avenue. Here's your armory, and I believe that was the Presbyterian Church. Yeah, Presbyterian Church. In 1916, Company G will be called to serve for the U.S. in what was known as the Mexican Border War. Mexican bandit terrorist Pancho Villa attacked several U.S. towns, including Columbus, New Mexico, in 1916 that results in deaths of 23 Americans. President Wilson will call upon General Pershing to apprehend Villa, which includes the U.S. marching into Mexico. The National Guard, including Company G, are called into service. The National Guard's primary role will be to protect the U.S.-Mexican border. And Company G will spend most of its time in San Antonio, in the southern Texas area. Although Company G doesn't see any action, what they do receive is professional military training. Company G will serve from 1916 and will return to Appleton in February 1917. Now on the table up here, I have a panoramic shot of Company G taken days before they ship out to as part of the Mexican Border War, which is pretty cool. They're standing right in front of the armory. This particular image behind me is the front page of the Appleton Crescent the day Company G returns home. As you can imagine, it's headline news. There were special sections when the boys from Company G came home. All right. Commanding Company G in both the Mexican Border War and soon-to-be World War I is Captain Lothar Graf of Appleton. Born in Hortonville, he works for the family business of Graf Manufacturing, which is located in the Flats, near the current location of Lawrence University, those tennis courts down by the Flats. That's about where Graf Manufacturing was located. In doing some of my research for my World War I tour, I was able to locate and talk to some Graf family members. The family story goes that Mom Graf told Lothar that if he served and fought against Germany in the fatherland in World War I, he would not be welcomed back into the family business. Needless to say, Lothar does serve, and he will continue to work for the family business after the war. By the end of the war, he's promoted to the rank of major. And there are many stories. I could probably spend another hour talking about Captain Graf, of how revered he is and loved by his men. One soldier is quoted as saying the men would, quote, "The men would go through hell for Captain Graf." And another little piece of trivia, in the 1920s, after the war, he ran unsuccessfully for mayor of Appleton. Now, again, the family story is that I was told that he was kind of forced to run for office. He didn't want to, but he did it anyways, and he lost. And after reading all of these stories about Captain Graf, I find it incredibly hard to believe why he did not win mayor. Must have been a scandal or something that we haven't uncovered or something. All right. July 16th, 1917, The National Guard is federalized, and now Company G is under the control of the U.S. Army and is told to immediately report. If you were a private in Company G during this time, you would make $30 a month. Sergeant would make $38 a month, and captain would make $200 a month. U.S. regulations state that a soldier must be between 5'1" and 6'6" tall and between 118 and 211 pounds. Now, the Crescent reports that McKinley Robinson of Company G is 5'1", and Frank Bellew is 6'6". I find it a little suspicious that that happens to be the range, the height range that we just talked about. Fake news, I guess, right? August 6, 1917, Company G leaves for Camp Douglas, Wisconsin, along with the rest of the 2nd Regiment. However, their stay is short-lived. Company G will leave for training at Camp Ellis, New York, on August 17th. Now, this image behind me is one of the only pictures that we really know of taken of Company G, literally days before they ship out. This I enlarged from a postcard size picture that we had. Now, as of until about an hour ago, it was the only known picture that I know is out there. And a gentleman shared with me tonight that in his home, he actually has one of his father in a panoramic picture. So we know that there are 2 pictures out there, which is awesome, All right. Chance to win Tom Sutter's money here in a second. While Company G is at Camp Douglas, the 2nd Regiment is asked to provide 3 companies to assist in the creation of a new Army division. The companies that will be transferred to Camp Ellis, New York are from Appleton, Oshkosh, and Fond du Lac. And your first opportunity to win some of Tom Sutter's money is, does anybody know who the gentleman is on the left? Yell it out if you know it. I heard it, MacArthur. That is right, Douglas MacArthur. Tom will pay you up after the presentation here. Douglas MacArthur is Chief of Staff of the 42nd Division. He will create a division that is made up entirely of National Guard units that MacArthur calls, quote, will stretch like a rainbow across the United States. 26 states are represented what will be called the 42nd Division or Rainbow Division. The 42nd Division is still in existence today, and that is still the patch that you will see on their uniform. The 3 companies will form the 150th Machine Gun Battalion of the 42nd Division. Appleton formed Company A, but so we don't confuse everybody, we'll still keep calling them Company G. Okay, Company G. That's what everybody called them even after the war, Company G. Machine Gun Company was a support unit focused around its primary weapon, the Hotchkiss machine gun, which is shown in this picture. The Hotchkiss machine gun fires 8mm rounds, 250 to 400 rounds per minute. It has an accuracy distance of 1,000 to 3,000 yards. The gun itself, you can kind of see here, the gun itself weighs 55 pounds. The tripod, right down there, weighs 70 pounds, and the spare barrel that they will carry around with them weighs 28 pounds. Because of the size and weight of the weapon, manpower is required in the transport, setup, and operation of the gun. So the company will be broken down into squads. Now, I'm not expecting everyone to, I guess, number 1, see this, but number 2, memorize it. But what I want to point out of this is an organizational chart of a typical machine gun company in World War I. In its simplest unit, a squad has 1 machine gun with 10 to 12 men and 1 cart pulled by either a mule or a truck. Again, think of some of that weird things that are happening here. You have a new form of weapon, advanced weapon, being pulled by a 4-legged animal. That was World War I. Each company had 16 machine guns, and each man had his own designated job, such as carrying a gun barrel, a tripod, or ammunition. Company G would ship out for Europe with the 42nd Division in October 1917 and trained there until February 1918. This image is one of the few images that we know of Company G while serving in Europe. I'm sure some of you have seen this photo as well. There's somewhere in Europe, we don't know exactly where, but you can see the machine gun in the background here. And this gentleman here, last name is Bogan, his brother will pass away during World War I. He will die in camp. But as far as we know, most of these men did survive the war. Old Company G and the 150th Machine Gun Battalion would receive their, quote, baptism by fire in July 1918. Now, I mentioned that they were training in France up until February 1918. They will finally go to the front, but not necessarily see any action until July 1918. The first is this battle here, the Battle of Champaign. What happens on the night of July 15th, Old Company G would be attached with the 165th Infantry up here. These are the bad guys. This is the Germans here. And they will launch their fifth and final major offensive in World War I. Company G is hanging out here, and that night they receive some incredible, horrific barrage of cannon, and they are attacked that night. The attack goes so poorly for the Allies that they are pushed back. The Germans actually make way, and they push the Allies back. It isn't until a few weeks later, after the Battle of Champaign, that the 150th and the 42nd Division would go on the offensive beginning July 25th through August 3rd, and that is displayed on this picture here in what is known as the Battle of the Ord River. Here the fighting was fierce. Douglas MacArthur's own words, quote, "We took Mercy Fermi in hand-to-hand fight. Their artillery was concentrated. Their machine guns east and west of town raked us fore and aft, but nothing could stop the impetus of that mad charge. We forded the river, we ascended the slopes, we killed the garrison in town to a man. At dusk on July 29th, we were in sole possession." July 25th through August 3rd, 1918, the Rainbow Division suffered 5,476 killed and wounded, mostly in 4 infantry regiments. Its attached units had an additional 983 casualties for a total of 6,459 during those decisive days of the battle at the Ord. July 1918 would be the bloodiest of Company G's service in World War I. These two battles were accounted for the majority of deaths of Company G during their service in World War I. Now I had to include this because this is a fun little picture here. This gentleman off to the side is Lieutenant Alan Ellis of Company G, and this is a hand-drawn map he made of Company G's experience in World War I. It is available online. All you type in is Old Company G in the Great War, and you can have access to this. But what I'm trying to show here, here's Paris, here's Germany, and Company G starts out over here. They spend 100 days here after February 1918, and the July 15th attack is over here. They get pushed back, and ultimately they will come back with the battle at the Ord River, and ultimately by the end of the war, November 1918, they will make their way to Germany. At the end of the war, Company G will stay in Germany as an occupational force. A couple more pictures of Company G when they come home after serving as an occupational force in May 1919. As you can imagine, this was big news. Headlines, it was fun to look in some of the newspapers, headlines, when expected arrival, when are they coming home, when are they coming home. This is at the depot here in Appleton as Company G comes home. And here's a larger picture of that as well. What's neat about that is even other servicemen from Appleton are also in attendance greeting Company G. These are naval officers or naval men here, and with other units, men from serving in Appleton, are also there greeting Company G when they are home. Company G leaves for Europe in 1917 with 155 men. 18 would die in service. Comparing that overall, there are 40 men from Appleton who would die in service during World War I. This is an unidentified and undated photo, but we know that it was taken on College Avenue. We can guess that this was probably taken sometime after 1921, when those soldiers who were killed in action were finally returned home to the United States. So let's talk about a few of those men who were returned home who served in Company G. Private Harveypierre. Private Pierre was 19 years old when he was killed in action July 15, 1918 in Champaign, France. Again, this was the first battle. If you remember, I was talking about the German offensive, massive barrage that night. Harveypierre was the first soldier from Appleton killed in World War I, and because of that, Appleton's VFW post is named on his honor. A fun story about him that we found is that Harvey wanted to sign up so bad, and he was on the border of whether the weight limit, that it said he drank himself with so much water that water was almost coming out of his ears so he could make the weight limit. Good old Harveypierre. Private First Class William Brockman. He was married with one child and worked at the J.J. Howard hardware store in Appleton. He was killed in action in July 15, 1918. And because of his actions, he was a recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross, which is the second highest honor next to the Medal of Honor. And I'll read a little bit from the citation. It says, Private Brockman continued to operate his machine gun against the attacking enemy after all members of the crew had been killed. Then, going forward to rescue a wounded comrade, was killed himself instantly. Now, I wish we had a better picture of him, but it's a copy of a copy, unfortunately. This is actually his marker, grave marker. He's buried in a military cemetery in France, and that is his marker. Sgt Everett Oni Johnston. Sgt Johnston was 29 years old when he was killed in action at the Battle of the Ourcq on July 29, 1918. He was actually attending training school, or officers training school, earlier that year. Appleton Legion Post 38 is named in his honor as the highest ranking soldier who dies in World War I. In 1921, the funerals of William Heiss and Oni Johnston are photographed here. Now, a second opportunity just to win Tom's money. Anybody recognize that church? No, not the Lawrence Chapel. The First Congregational Church. Okay, does anyone yell that? You did? Tom, make sure you pay her there too. All right. So let's talk a little bit about Appleton in the home front. What was going on here in Appleton at the time of World War I? Food conservation. President Wilson creates the U.S. Food Administration in August 1917, and the objectives included to feed U.S. troops and feed a starving Europe. Again, remember, the war has been going on for several years. Farm fields, all of them are destroyed, and food is critical, not only for the soldiers over there, but also, the citizens still living over there. Another opportunity to win Tom's money. Can anybody identify this gentleman here on this picture?
Herbert Hoover.
Hoover, yes, very good. Mr. Hoover is appointed the leader of the U.S. Food Administration. And he will, because of his success in bringing food to Belgium, after Belgium is attacked by Germany in 1914, he will lead a very successful program to feed starving Belgium. So President Wilson appoints him to lead the U.S. food conservation movement. Hoover's plan focuses around one person, and that is the housewife. Housewives were asked to sign a pledge card that they would pledge their support in food conservation in the home. If they did, they would receive a poster from the U.S. Food Administration to display in the front window in their home. The image on the right is an example of that poster. And the image here on the left, that is the pledge card. The Post-Crescent report, the Crescent reported a week into the drive, 2 people in the first ward refused to sign the card, while second ward had 150 people refuse. However, many will change their mind, and on December 3rd, 1917, the Appleton City Clerk reports that, quote, only 100 women are unfriendly to Hoover's conservation plan. The image on the left is a full-page ad from the Crescent, letting its readers know of the upcoming pledge card drive. The image on the right shows the ad in a patriotic poster format you might see around town. And sandwiched in between is a friendly reminder found in the Crescent that you have nothing to worry about in signing the pledge. And for those of you who can't read that, I'll read it for you. It says, some women have refused to sign the U.S. Food Administration pledge because their husbands had warned them against signing any kind of paper for fear they would contract to buy a sewing machine or a set of books. The answer is talk it over with your husband, and then be sure it is the U.S. Food Administration pledge you are signing. This involves no risk. There are no fees, no dues of any kind. Restaurants and households were encouraged to follow daily dietary restrictions, such as Wheatless Mondays, Wheatless Tuesdays, Meatless Tuesdays, Wheatless Wednesdays, Porkless Saturdays. You were also encouraged to have a meatless breakfast, 1 wheatless meal each day, and wheat and sugar were also rationed. Now, what's a little bit difficult to see here, but the Crescent would publish menu and recipe ideas many times during the course of the week. And one of my favorites, which is shown here, is a recipe of how to make cod fish balls, which I haven't told my wife yet. We are going to try this weekend with some sauerkraut. Here's some examples of other menu and food info that was published in the Appleton Crescent, which included a friendly reminder that graham bread violates Wheatless Wednesdays. It says in this image on the right, apparently there were a lot of people violating this in Appleton. Practically all public eating places in the city have been serving graham bread on Wednesdays. Everybody got called out that time. One of the other ways Appleton homes helped in food conservation was by aiding local farmers, by having their own gardens, or victory gardens. A September 18, 1918, Appleton Crescent article proudly announced that Appleton was home to over 3,100 victory gardens. So once you harvested your own victory garden, homes were encouraged to can their goods. Here the Crescent has an ad on how to get a free canning book. Or you could attend a free community canning event at the Armory. I love this. All ladies are requested to attend. And you see on the image there on the left, on the title block there, food will win the war. That became a very popular slogan throughout the war. And also, local businesses took advantage of these victory gardens as they advertised that they had all of your canning supply needs. And here are just a few. I want to throw some of these on the screen here for you. Hopefully you can see that. We have the Schaefer Brothers Grocers. We have the Rush Hardware Company, the W.C. Fish, Irvin Hoffman Bakery, and the Wickman Brothers, the grocers on College Avenue. Hoover's conservation plan was so popular, his name became a new word for conservation. Hooverized or hooverizing became the new word. Here are some hooverized bargains found at Hickenbotham and Son, the leading Fifth Ward grocer. 744 Richmond Avenue. At the Badger Pantorium on Appleton Street, you can have your clothes hooverized. Don't buy new clothes because it's a new season. Have your suit cleaned. It's amazing as we go through these how many times you see good old Uncle Sam in these ads. The Appleton Shoe Repairing Shop encouraged people to have their shoes repaired so we can conserve on leather. There's good old Uncle Sam again. At the Robert Malley Appleton Shoe Repairing Shop on College Avenue. Conservation wasn't limited to food and clothes. In late 1917, early 1918, the U.S. faced a severe coal shortage. Of course, conserving for the war effort was a top cause, but the other was transportation. Believe it or not, there was actually a shortage of boxcars to ship the coal. It got so bad that U.S. Fuel Administrator Harry Garfield orders all non-essential U.S. factories to close down for 5 days in January 1918. Appleton has 2 factories that were allowed to remain open. The Eagle Manufacturing Company, because they manufactured spring seating machines, and the Appleton Car Mover Company, because they were involved in the mining industry. But that wasn't all. Stores and factories were ordered to be closed for 10 straight Mondays through March 25th, 1918. Exception here is that municipalities, facilities, food, and businesses pertinent to the war effort could remain open. The Crescent reports that 3,500 men and women are unemployed during these shutdowns. And keeping in mind, these were days before one could file for unemployment. However, it is also reported that 16 of the area's largest 25 plants have agreed to give their employees 50% of the regular day's wages as compensation, which I think is pretty cool. In an effort to promote coal conservation in your home, Tag Your Shovel was a way for homeowners to do just that. So the image on the left shows these soldiers and workers tagging their shovel. And here is the tag that you would apply to your shovel. Again, so when you are using your shovel, you are reminded to conserve on coal. You were also expected to help out the war effort financially. In this case, through the various Liberty Loan Drives. Here are a few ads promoting the 4th Liberty Loan Drive in September 1918. And what's interesting about that, I heard somebody already see that, these ads were almost like a template. They were kind of mass produced, but they always had a local sponsor, if you will. In this particular one, the Simon Cheese Company. Here are a few more promoting the Liberty Loan Drive in September. This particular one, the Appleton Wireworks, and this one on the right here, a whole host of companies, including the M&M Motor Company, the Appleton Auto Company, Appleton Tire Shop, Marshall Paper Company. But I always thought, look at the artwork on something like this. I think those are pretty neat. There's Uncle Sam again. And here's Uncle Sam again. It wasn't uncommon for cities to document who was not buying Liberty bonds. If you did not buy your fair share, you were called a slacker. We know at least of one time that the Appleton Crescent published names of known slackers. Can you imagine that? Your name is in the paper that you were not buying Liberty bonds. Of course, local businesses try to tug at your patriotic heart in getting your business. Here's a couple businesses in Appleton who are using the war effort as a way to promote business. We have the Heckert Shoe Company, talking about the regulation Army shoe that they would proudly sell to you, as well as the Frank Hyde Company that had military watches for sale. These are promotional ads informing its readers on how costly it would be to switch jobs during the war. Apparently, it would cost a business and your country between $20 and $200 in cash per person every time somebody switched a job. So here was Kimberly Clark with us sponsoring this reminder, as well as the Graf Manufacturing Company. At this time, Lothar is in France. Some other ads you could read in the Crescent during this time, again, focusing on the war. You have the Victrola. Yeah, I actually practiced that before I got here too, and I still messed it up. So here, this one shows one in the home and of course in the camp. Another reason why you should buy it. And of course for your soldier boy in camp or at the front, for your soldier lad patrolling the high seas from you to him to make his heart light and to keep tight the home ties, photographs. Here's the Donner Studio reminding you of photograph. Here's some more ads from the Schlafer Hardware Company. The Soldier Athlete, again, promoting to the Soldier Athlete. And Geenans, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Useful articles for the soldier, and also where a place to get all your accessories that you need. Army blankets, barrack bags. One of my favorite ads here is the one on the left. Call to the colors sale. William Laux. He's forced to sell out. He's received his official call from Uncle Sam to fight for his country. It's your one big chance to buy men's and boys' suits. Now, if that isn't a tag for a sale, I don't know what is. And on the right, we're seeing this particular ad is talking about the advantages of having a fuel-efficient gas range in your home. Of course, the ad is sponsored by the Wisconsin Traction Light Heat and Power Company, who would gladly sell you a gas range. The last area I'm going to talk about here, about the home front, is probably more of the darker side of the war and how it actually came to be also seen here in Appleton. All right, can anyone here, I think this is the last chance to win Tom's money. On the right side here, this particular photograph, this is Kaiser Wilhelm, leader of Germany. Anyone see or recognize who he is supposedly? Mr. La Follette, Bob La Follette, U.S. Senator from Wisconsin. You won your own money back, Tom. Nice.
I protected some.
Right. When World War I is declared, 9 of the 11 U.S. representatives from Wisconsin vote against going to war. 1 U.S. Senator also opposes it, and that is Senator Bob La Follette. In addition, Wisconsin's largest city, Milwaukee, has a socialist mayor. Remember that stat we talked about earlier? 38% of people living in Wisconsin with ties to Germany and Austria-Hungary. Adding all of this up, Wisconsin is being called by some in the United States as a traitor state. The image on the left is from a New York newspaper basing its info on the 1918 spring elections in Wisconsin and how many votes were for either the progressive or the socialist parties, basically saying that these areas were pro-German. So here you have the various 11 voting districts. Surprise, surprise, Sheboygan is in there, and Milwaukee. And I think technically we are covered in that area too. And one of the points of counterpoint to this, that Wisconsin was not a pro-German state, was the fact that at the very first draft or selective service that the United States had, Wisconsin exceeded its registered draftees, if you will. So this was a very poor argument that people made against Wisconsin. Suspicions and sedition, foreigners in Appleton. In April 1917, the Citizenship Promotion Force formed at Lawrence University with the goal to train foreigners for citizenship. Alien enemies must be registered or be interned. Alien enemies are Germans in this country who who are not American citizens and must report to the U.S. Deputy Marshal's Office by July 31st, 1917. This was also reported in Appleton. You were also encouraged to become a U.S. citizen, and this could be done on Naturalization Day on November 7th, 1917. It was reported that there was 122 applications submitted in Appleton, only 53 accepted, including a Lawrence professor. I would love to know what that test was about and why only 53 were accepted. The Sedition Law of 1918. This allowed the arrest of citizens for any disloyal, profane, scurrilous, or abusive language about the form of the government of the United States, or the flag of the United States, or the uniform of the Army and Navy. This actually was enforced here in Appleton. On August 9th, 1918, a man was overheard after hearing about a local soldier who was killed from Appleton, who was killed in the war. He was overheard to have said, quote, "That's one less bum to worry about." He was immediately reported to the authorities and was arrested and had a trial in Milwaukee. I don't know what the outcome of that was. Couldn't find the resolution of that. September 14th, 1918, Herman Heller was in jail in Appleton. He was from Germany, and he had family in Germany, including a wife and children. When the U.S. went to war against Germany in April 1917, all ties and communication between the United States and Germany was cut off. So obviously, Mr. Heller was no longer able to communicate with his family. He did not adhere to registering like he was supposed to, and he was interned or jailed. On September 14th, 1918, Mr. Herman Heller was found after committing suicide in his jail cell in Appleton. October 18th, 1918, the arrest of William Struck, president of the Carpenters Union. He was overheard in a local establishment while getting local refreshment to criticize President Wilson and the war effort. He was immediately arrested. During the war, 90 people in Wisconsin would be indicted under this particular act. One of my favorite stories, local stories of World War I here in Appleton. July 29th, 1917. Again, the U.S. has just declared war about 3 months prior to Germany. The Ideal Lumber Company plant has a fire one evening. And these guys are located right here. Here's the Ideal Labor Company. This is 2nd Street, or currently Wisconsin Street, right? And right here would be here's Appleton coated paper in 1917, or which we call now Appleton Papers Affion. So here's the Ideal Lumber Company. Early morning, July 29th, there is a fire, a large fire. It's reported that nearly 5,000 people from Appleton go check out the fire. Company G is actually recruited as firefighters to help put out. A couple of members from Company G are hurt in putting out the fire. But what is more astonishing about this is the investigation of how or what caused this fire. The Appleton Crescent newspaper, under this headline, has this headline: German spies suspected. Now breathe easy, folks. There were no German spies in Appleton. The next day, the Appleton Crescent reported that a young juvenile had thrown a cigarette into the lumber yard and caused the fire. But again, the point of this is talking about the stress, the different actions, the different time period that even Appleton was going through, the suspicions of foreigners during the war. All right. Entertainment-wise in Appleton, if you went to the theater in Appleton, you were notified that each purchaser of each ticket, a tax of 10% would now be paid. So now you had to pay 25 cents to go to the theater here in Appleton. which included the war tax. I just threw a couple of these in here to kind of show you some of the programming that was going on at some of the theaters here in Appleton. Here is the Appleton Theater, again, focusing on some of the war topics. Over the Top was shown on August 3rd. If you wanted to see something about the Kaiser, you could see that. Or The Girl He Left Behind. Always leave them smiling when you say goodbye. Love's sweetest story ever told. And here I thought it was ours. Yeah. What was also interesting during if you attended the theater, you might encounter what was called the 4-Minute Men. And this was recorded here in Appleton. What the 4-Minute Men was if you were going to change the reels of a theater, a motion picture, it took them approximately 4 minutes to change out the film. So during this lull of 4 minutes, there would be somebody coming up on stage reminding you to either buy war stamps, Liberty bonds, or some other patriotic act. And again, this was recorded that even Appleton had what was called the 4-Minute Men. This was something done nationally through the Central Information Department in the U.S. government. Again, a way to promote the war effort. So finally, November 11th, 1918, the war is over. And this is actually a picture, I hope you can see it, on College Avenue on November 11th in the afternoon of, there was a large parade when people went up and down College Avenue. This particular one, the sign says Kaiser Bill, and it's showing the funeral of Kaiser Bill in Appleton. Obviously a dummy of Kaiser Wilhelm being pushed in a wheelbarrow by this gentleman in Appleton. All right, so with November 11th, Appleton goes crazy about it. I'm just going to read this one little section here from the newspaper from November 11 as I wrap up. Well trained in noise-making after the premature report of Thursday, which actually there was a false report a couple days prior that the war was over, Appleton went wild today with the final official announcement of the signing of the armistice with Germany. The first accurate news of the greatest event in modern history was born to the city through the Crescent's Extra, which was issued at 3:20 o'clock in the morning, 2 hours before any paper in the city. From the first announcement up to 9 o'clock in the morning, no extraordinary excitement was evidenced. However, at 8:50 o'clock, every whistle in the city blew its message of celebration, and the deafening din was intermittently continued all through the morning. Small boys, particularly the early rising carriers, ran riot with tin pails. Automobiles, horns screeched frantically. Impromptu parades were organized, and if any one element of existence were lacking, it was that which was being observed, peace. That was reported on November 11th, the day the war ended in 1918. So with that, I'm going to kind of wrap up here. Today, we're a couple of weeks away from Memorial Day, so just thought some of these stories, remembering some of these men from Appleton who died during the war. A couple reminders. Of course, you've always seen the Doughboy. College Avenue Bridge, or Memorial Bridge, I should say, they actually was named in honor of soldiers from World War I. The actual name is Sailors and Soldiers Memorial Bridge, which was dedicated to the men from Outagamie County who died in World War I. So next time you're cruising up Memorial Drive, maybe you think of a couple things that you learned here tonight of Company G and the boys from Outagamie County. So with that, I think my time here is done. A shameless plug. If you'd like to learn more about some of these things, I will be having another tour, cemetery tour in August. We go into a little bit deeper of some of the men who fought with Company G. There's also some surprises. They're not all men who we talk about in the tour. And a good way to talk further about the men who are buried at Riverside Cemetery who participated in World War I. So with that, I thank you for your time.